We're back with more discussions of our 2022 GR86, and you're of one of two minds about it. You either can't wait to hear more about this car, or you can't believe we're covering it again.
Our show bought this car specifically to compare against cars that compete directly with it, but some cars that don't.
Because the idea of a usable 2+2, fairly affordable, rear-wheel drive, manual transmission, dedicated chassis sports car is becoming more and more rare. So let's celebrate it by buying one and driving against everything we can think of. So here we are again with a really interesting comparison. Because this car out the door, brand new, MSRP, tax, title, license, the whole thing, $34,000.
But this car isn't a new idea. This car is simply the modern execution of an idea that has existed for a long time. What if you could have a sports car that's similar proportions? It's got a 4-cylinder engine, manual transmission, almost the same wheelbase, perfect 50-50 weight distribution. It just happens to be 30 to 40 years older, and it's got a Porsche badge on the hood.
This is a 1989 Porsche 944 Turbo. Now, there's a lot of things to say about this car, but first off, I should acknowledge, yes, we have heard of the AE86 Corolla, and we do know that the GR86 is the direct successor of that car. Maybe they should have called it a Corolla and saved us all some time. Having said that, the 944 was first introduced in 1982. That's a year before the AE86 Corolla. But interestingly enough, it was built on top of the 924 idea, which was released in 1976.
Same thing. It was a project that existed between Volkswagen, well, actually for Audi, and then Porsche bought the project and finished it and put a Porsche badge on the hood, right? Then there was the second generation, which is the 944.
I would argue that the current GR86 is the spiritual successor to this car, the late 80s Porsche 944. If you think about what this car is and the stats of this car, it's amazing how similar it is to the GR.
This car has just under 72,000 miles on it. It's squeaky, the door panel squeaks, there's a lot of rattles, the hatch doesn't shut properly, the paint is far from perfect, but it's cool. A car that is old but still drives well is a good car. Doesn't matter when it was conceived or what year it was built. That is the 944. And this does feel like the old version of the GR86 from back in the day.
But this recipe is not alone, because you could buy yourself a first gen. And of course, the first gen can be tuned into oblivion. Everyone bought one and tuned it. So we found kind of the ultimate naturally aspirated tuner version of the first generation to put with this car and go, where's your money best spent?
It's a 2014 Scion FRS.
The owner, Jeff, wanted to make the best possible NA version of the first gen FRS. He bought this car brand new in 2014 for $30,000. He's had it ever since, 8 years in, and he has constantly been tuning it.
He wanted to make this as comfortable as he could, so still very streetable, everyday driving, and as fast on track as he could possibly make it.
He's an engineer, he enjoys tinkering with it. He sent us the full list of everything that's been done to this car. And it was, well, it was horrifying is what it was.
This car has over 65 different parts. It's as if this should be the car for the US that Toyota should have done. No turbo and no supercharger. But everything else, it's almost an attempt to make the first gen into the second gen.
Great cars, great roads, and all the reasons we love to drive.
TV, web, and podcast. This is Everyday Driver.
This is the reason we bought the car. It was an improvement in everything we liked about the first gen. I liked the first gen enough to own one. Paul was always on the fence. He was the one that said we should buy one of these.
They gave it a stiffer structure, but most importantly, they gave it more power and a whole lot more refinement. And this term, modding out of class, we attribute it to our friend Matt Farah. You've heard us talk about it a lot, and it's very easy and tempting to get a car as good as this one is and try to go extract more.
There are a few Achilles heels. For example, the brakes have never been said to be great, so...
With our gold wheels on, we did an upgrade with a before and after braking test.
A 60-mile-per-hour emergency stop. First, with the stock brakes. We marked the start and stopping points.
Then we took off the stock brakes and put on the Z26 upgraded pads and rotors from our friends at Power Stop. And did the same test again.
The improvement was better than we expected, and it made us more confident.
This GR86 feels genuinely excitable. And it's interesting to put it between these other two cars because the stats are so similar.
For this, we paid $34,000. If you got 34 grand and you're looking for a 944, you can find one, and it'll probably be pretty good.
When it was first released, the 944 was naturally aspirated only. They offered a turbo starting in '86, and then a Turbo S that had more horsepower, and then, inexplicably in '89, like this car, they made the Turbo S and the normal turbo. It's all the same power.
You could say the 944 Turbo wins just by virtue of power alone, but you'd be wrong. It wasn't a light switch kind of power like you associate with turbocharged cars, especially Porsches from that era. It's very progressive. You can sit here and watch the boost needle build, and it's just a surge of power.
Half throttle, you're like, oh, it's a little bit of turbo. If you want to find all of the turbo, the only way to wake it up is to completely bury the gas pedal into the carpet. When you're moving from a standstill, this car actually requires a lot of gas pedal to give you enough to not kill the car because the engine is so bogged down before it's on turbo that learning how to get set off takes a lot of effort.
Yes, down low, it's gutless. But when you really get into it, that's where this engine is happy. Same thing with the GR86. It's above 4,000 right now is where this car builds power.
In its day, this was a really fast car. In fact, the fastest production four-cylinder being made. 0 to 60 was definitely under 6 seconds. Some people got it as low as 5.5.
Come on, baby. I need some power. There we go. Above 4. There we go. Hello. That's where this engine likes to hang out. I will give the 944 points for having a better sounding engine. Because of age and driveline losses, this car probably makes similar power to the GR86. That car's brand new. This one's 33 years old. Yes, it's got more torque. Yes, that turbo helps. But the GR86 now has power to move that car that it never had.
In most normal driving, and even in a lot of canyon driving, this feels every bit as powerful in horsepower and torque as that 944.
The feeling in a 944 is as if it just gave you enough. You get that same feeling here. I gave you just enough. It's refined just slightly. Drive it like it is and extract the most you can as a driver, or start to add parts. It's fascinating. And I think the power addition to this one has given it the charm the first gen was lacking.
First generation 86, the FRS, the BRZ, the GT86, whatever you want to call it, the first generation was a car that got tuned into oblivion. And that was because from the factory it had a very noticeable torque dip. We've talked about it like crazy. Even I tuned my first gen 86. I put a header and an exhaust and an open flash tune on it to just kill the torque dip.
But here, it's making 221 wheel horsepower. The car has been dynoed multiple times, which means this fits very nicely between the GR86 and the 944 Turbo.
Of course, as you can hear, there's an exhaust on here as well. Things have gotten, well, definitely louder.
this is not the engine that needed to get louder. Sounding different I'm fine with, but it's right on the edge for me. But the power delivery is smooth and consistent, and it's just like the other two cars, but it's not forced induction.
In his tuning, not only has the horsepower and torque increased with everything else that's been done to the car, but there was a pursuit to kill the torque dip. It's improved. But there are a few places in this car, right around 4,000 RPM, where you can go, oh, I remember this used to have a torque problem. It feels better. It feels good. I think I'm fine with it. But it's like finding an old injury, like you move just the wrong way and you go, oh, that's right, I did hurt that one time, didn't I? That's what the torque dip feels like in this car. It's not really there, but the scar tissue is.
But there's elements of the car that make it so nice to drive. And the good news is the owner has driven it. It has 177,000 miles on it in 8 years. That's impressive. You name the part, and I bet you it's been added to this car.
There's a short shift kit on here, but Jeff never liked the TRD shift knob, so he had one made to look like a TRD shift knob, but have more weight to it. Part of his pursuit was to get as many TRD, Toyota Racing Development products, as he possibly could. Many of them were never sold in the US. So the prices that he gave us were the prices of the parts, but not the shipping or the importing of those parts. Then he had to put them on himself, so he saved all of the fees for actually getting it put on. Just the TRD items covered: the muffler, lightweight flywheel, clutch, short throw shifter, transmission and engine mount, strut tower brace, adjustable suspension, sway bars, brakes, new center armrest, side skirts, bumper, spoiler, all the bushings. That doesn't include the stuff that's on here from engine, Mishimoto, HKS, Perrin, and a custom tune. You're not ready. You're just not ready. $30,000, almost $31,000. So this car, as you're looking at it, is a $60,000 automobile that is not turbo or supercharged, that has the power of the new version. Yes, okay, that cost was spent over 8 years. I get it. And he likes to tweak. I understand that too. It's part of his hobby. $60,000 in this car. That buys a really, really nice 944, and it almost buys you 2 brand new GR86s.
There's one big note about all these modifications, and that is traction control. You have to drive with it off every time you get into the car, because the car can now do things that traction control wasn't designed for. It works normally, it all works normally, but it's so nimble, it's so tight. The modifications to this car are astounding. The braking alone.
The huge brake kit on this car is almost too much for the street. A normal amount of braking pressure that I'd put on in the GR86 does this. Normal, oh, I might need to slow down now, braking. And this car practically stops.
The information coming out of this car is astounding. I would like more steering feel though. For this level, I want to feel every undulation in the road, and I don't. I feel precision, I feel excellent car balance and capability, but I want to feel more out of the road.
There's not an overwhelming amount of feel here, but the directness is subconscious. The steering takes the same amount of steering angle as our car, but there's no delay in how the body responds because all of the bushings and the changes have made it completely immediate.
It is the manifestation of the 86 platform managing its tires in the best way possible. I do love driving this with traction control off. It's so precise. And the styling. Look at this, the front splitter is $1,000. GRMN front splitter, you just don't find that everywhere. This car has a carbon drive shaft. It's so good to drive when you drive it fast and hard.
The 944 was known for its handling, a 50-50 weight distribution, a really agile car. These turbos got a little bit heavier than a lot of the rest of the 944s. This turbo version from the late 80s is 3,100 pounds, which makes it heavier than both the other cars we have here. This car is still quite fun to drive fast, but you have to think about it because the steering rack is incredibly slow. It's about 18.5 to 1.
And so you think you're turning into a corner like a modern car, and it's barely keeping up. So you have to adjust your driving style. But once you do, this thing is nearly as quick through corners.
You have to be turning in before you actually need the car to respond, because then behind the slow steering rack is body roll. Once it gets itself rolled over and settled, the agility is excellent, and you can actually fine-tune how it sits in a corner with little tiny steering adjustments, but getting there takes a lot of effort.
I'd like a not quite as soft suspension on this car, but when this car starts to move quickly through corners, that's where the similarities start to really blur.
The body roll is the most surprising thing about the 944. The closest modern equivalent I can tell you is the touring version of the ND Miata.
It's so interesting. The performance parts that the Turbo S had 33 years ago or more make this drive and do things on canyon roads that modern cars do. In that sense, it hasn't aged a day. But yeah, it feels creaky, but it is fun to feel the GR86 feeling in a 33-year-old car.
Never lets you down. That's the thing I keep being surprised by in the 944. And I've driven it a few times, and every time I drive one, I just think I could drive this much faster than I am. And then I keep getting quicker, and it keeps going, okay.
I like the way this car makes its power because there is no more torque dip. It's very progressive.
That FRS has similar power output to this. Of course, a lot of money has been thrown at it to extract the same power as this 2.4 liter out of that original 2 liter. In spite of all of the tuning, this still has a smoother power delivery than that FRS.
You have such fine control of everything. That's what I love about the 86. It's just needed this power, and now it carries its momentum.
But after climbing out of that incredibly tuned FRS, this feels like it has a significant amount of body roll. It has a little bit of give in all of the inputs, and that's kind of pleasing. I never really thought I'd say that. I never thought I'd say, well, the softer car is better, but the softer car is better. Now, it isn't nearly as much body roll or nearly as much give in every one of the inputs as that 944. I didn't expect this car to feel like a middle ground. I never thought that was going to be the case.
I think we've started a fight. As a car enthusiast, you're going to spend money. And we promised ourselves when we bought the GR86 that we would drive it against everything we could think of. So starting with the 944, there might be something in you that wants a classic. Then there's the first gen, there's the camp, like first gen 86, just mod it, there's plenty of parts available, you can get to the second gen. But I don't think so. Because this car is so good that this car is first place for me. And we have to decide. We can't just give them a gold star and a thumbs up and say they're all good. Choose how you're gonna spend your money, because you're gonna spend your money.
You're right. I mean, you've identified the camps already, and you do have to pick your camp. Some of you were saying classics above all else. Some of you were saying if you haven't tuned it, it's not your car yet. Some of you are saying if you like a car, buy one you like and put good tires on it and call it a day. I guess I'm picking the GR as well, ultimately is where we're going. But I mean, all three of these are incredible because they are so right on top of each other for power, for idea, for even the fact that they're 2+2s with similar weight. I mean, the similarities, when we got actually listing the stats on these, they were all like, yes, let's put those three cars together. But then you're driving all three and going, which camp am I in? And I am, not because we bought it, but because I'm a guy that I don't want to build. I want to buy something, put tires on it, drive it the end. And so as a result, guess which car I wind up in. But this is surprisingly good still.
Agreed.
And that is brilliantly done. And I would have never done it. I have to admit it.
I think the GR86 is the standout here, even though I respect this tremendously and I really like it. But you're right. there's money spent on this car.
Lots.
And if you're going to spend money, why not save a classic car? That's just me, but
Well, now you're revealing your stripes as well.
I agree.
I'm also going to
I'm
say that just
biased.
because we own it doesn't mean it gets to win, but today it just did.
The entire point of all three of these cars is to come down to fun. Which one do you like the best? Which one equates to the one you want to be in? You decide you want to go the classic Porsche route. You want to pay $20,000 to $40,000 for a good 944. Are you necessarily better off? No. I mean, really good 944s are expensive. You can pay $50,000, $60,000 or more for this car, but you know you're going to have to keep them running, and bad 944s are going to suck so much money out of your bank account. You're going to look at starving artists and think, what have they figured out? But there is a certain charm to this. And there's a satisfaction in building this up with the right parts, because if we're talking about modding out a class, well, this set the class. The 944 Turbo set the class, it set the bar.
The affordable fun of this car in its era is where the GR86 is now. It's kind of like an old pair of blue jeans. This is the old pair of blue jeans Porsche. Because every time you climb into it, you just think, yeah, this is right. This feels comfortable, I like this. And then you realize this is too beat up on to actually use every day, and I can't have this in every occasion. But I still really like it.
This car has extracted pretty much every bit of information, road feel, and handling capability that the 86 platform can handle. That's amazing to feel. I keep saying this, it's so impressive, but at what cost? All these modifications are over $30,000, more than the car itself.
If you're a person debating, do I buy the prior gen and tune it, how far do you want to go? What are you looking for? Can you accomplish what you want to accomplish for less money than buying the new car? Maybe, you might be able to. But if you're looking to find a definitive version like Jeff has done here, this was quite expensive to wind up in a very good place, pretty close to the new one. He even said as much. He told us, I might need one of the new cars. And this is his baby.
This feels like the modern reincarnation of a 944. And it's light enough that it moves now. This is the power the 86 always needed. And I felt that in the 944 a lot, thinking, why don't 86s have this kind of power? It's perfect. The only difference is it smells fresh and clean and new in this car, whereas you smell the 944 and you just get the oil and that old 80s car smell. It's very endearing. Don't get me wrong, I like it a lot.
There are a lot of fun cars out there. There are a lot of cars that are easy to drive. Very few are both. This GR86 is both. And the more we put it against other cars, other competitors that try to be both, the more I realize this car is very well balanced in both camps. Of course, as that FRS proves, you can take this chassis and you can tune it into something entirely different or much more focused into just being a track car. This car is what an update, a second generation should be. It's improved in all of the ways it needed improvement and not ruined in any of the ways it worked.